Really urgent news. While we were sleeping, China launched a special military operation against Taiwan. In particular, on the night of June 6, China announced the start of a military operation for maritime law enforcement in the waters east of the island of Taiwan. Western media immediately picked up this news. Against the backdrop of the recent threats voiced by Xi Jinping to Donald Trump during their summit in Beijing in May, when Xi Jinping stated directly that if the Taiwan issue is resolved in a way Beijing considers wrong, a major war will begin. In Beijing, they stated that this is a measure they were forced to take in response to the unilateral announcement by Japan and the Philippines of negotiations on maritime delimitation to the east of Taiwan Island, which constitutes a gross violation of China's territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests. That's how Beijing interprets it, but the United States allies in the region see it very differently. Let's objectively discuss what's really happening right now, what this special military operation by China is, and what consequences it might have. Believe me, this is where a very interesting story begins. My name is Alex Cipici, and before we start this interesting story, I ask you to please subscribe to this YouTube channel, give it a like, and leave any comment under this video. I would really appreciate it. So, on the night of June 6th, China announced the start of a special naval military operation against Taiwan. I'll present the facts first, then we'll analyze them together. It was officially announced that the operation is being carried out by the Ministry of Transport of China in coordination with the Maritime Safety Administrations of Fujian and Guangdong provinces, the Navigation Support Center of the East China Sea, and the East China Sea Rescue Bureau. So basically, Beijing has involved almost everyone possible, except for the Chinese People's Liberation Army itself. It was officially stated that the purpose of the operation is, and I quote, to fully exercise China's jurisdiction in the field of maritime administrative law enforcement, strengthen deep-sea patrol capabilities and control over navigation in key waters, ensure the safety of maritime navigation, and protect China's national rights and interests. In simple terms, to physically, literally show that this is their territory and that it will be Chinese ships controlling these waters. And here it's important to remember the context. On May 28, Tokyo and Manila initiated negotiations on delimiting their exclusive economic zones and continental shelf in an area that directly overlaps with waters east of Taiwan. It would seem that this doesn't concern China at all. In fact, Japan and the Philippines are simply dividing their territorial waters and their economic zones. But the official representative of the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mao Ning, emphasized that, in their view, the attempt by Japan and the Philippines to bypass China and initiate negotiations on maritime delimitation constitutes a blatant violation of international law, and that this seriously infringes on China's maritime rights and interests, and China will not allow this. Next, I will quote Mao Ning. According to China's domestic legislation and international law, including the United Nations Convention, China has an exclusive economic zone and continental shelf in this area. According to the UN Convention, the delimitation of economic zones and the continental shelf between states with opposite or adjacent coasts is carried out by agreement between the interested states on the basis of the principle of equity. Any delimitation in the waters east of Taiwan must be carried out with the participation of China. So, China claims that the waters intended for delimitation between Japan and the Philippines are located to the east of the island of Taiwan. And as you remember, China considers Taiwan its own, and accordingly, it considers these waters its own as well. In Beijing, they stated that, quote, compatriots on both sides of the Taiwan Strait belong to a single Chinese nation. They must defend their national position, protect the fundamental interests of the unified nation, and jointly safeguard the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China, as well as the common interests of the Chinese nation. Now let's analyze all of this. To understand why this news is very important, we need to understand what happened just over a week earlier, specifically on May 28, and why Beijing reacted the way it did. Once again, on May 28, Japan and the Philippines announced the start of official negotiations on delimiting their exclusive economic zones in the area east of Taiwan. Formally, this is a fairly standard diplomatic procedure. Countries with overlapping maritime claims sit down at the negotiating table in a civilized manner and agree on actual boundaries at sea. They clearly state this part is yours, that is ours, and another belongs to someone else. Japan and the Philippines, both allies of the United States of America, are both oriented toward cooperation with Washington in the Indo-Pacific region. The problem is that the area east of Taiwan is considered by China to be its own waters. Beijing does not recognize Taiwan's sovereignty, considers the island its province, and insists that any agreements on maritime boundaries in this area are impossible without China's participation. In other words, from Beijing's point of view, Tokyo and Manila just went ahead and started dividing Chinese territory without China and without its consent. That's why they quickly sent their ships to this region. The response came immediately, and it was telling. China didn't limit itself to diplomatic protests, but sent real ships to the disputed area. In other words, maritime law enforcement forces with a mandate to control navigation. What is meant is that they can't directly stop ships, block movement at sea, and so on. It doesn't matter whose economic zone it is. This isn't a military operation, at least not in the direct sense of the word, but it's a demonstration of physical presence and a claim to jurisdiction in these waters. And by the way, China has already used a similar tactic in the South China Sea against the Philippines. Back then, it was also the Coast Guard, patrol ships blocking access to disputed areas and continental shelves, and so on and so on. That is, this story has been developing there for a very long time. In a broader context, this episode is unfolding against the backdrop of several parallel processes. Xi Jinping warned Donald Trump in May that, as he put it, improper handling of the Taiwan issue would lead to a dangerous situation. China is currently actively building the largest nuclear arsenal in its history in the Xinjiang desert. Under Trump, the US has been consistently reducing its military presence in Europe, redirecting these military resources to the Indo-Pacific region, specifically to contain the ambitions of China. And in this situation, Japan and the Philippines are essentially taking a step that Beijing perceives as an attempt by these countries, with the support of the United States, to change the status quo around Taiwan. Through what seem to be formal legal mechanisms, China's naval action signals that the US allies' legal moves will face not just diplomatic protests, but also a physical presence in disputed waters. It's clear something noteworthy is happening in the region, and it'll be interesting to see Japan's and the Philippines' responses. Because it's already clear that something interesting is starting in the region right now. It's interesting to watch how Japan and the Philippines will get out of this situation. Потому что China's response, they're disputed. Something needs to be done. A naval operation is needed to delimit exclusive economic zones. The Allies' maneuvers should face only diplomatic protests, but China doesn't do this. The United States should intervene on China's side, and whether they do will be significant. Physical presence in disputed waters. He explained what's actually happening. If you still have questions, be sure to write them in the comments. Subscribe to Otvet Kitaya Sea Operation and don't forget to like the video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I would really appreciate it. This can be done such as allied maneuvers, diplomatic protests, but also by using the payment details in the description of this video, or by your physical presence as mentioned in the description, or by the QR code on your screens. Let me remind you, I have China's response, a naval operation, a signal, and a separate Ukrainian language YouTube channel. And if you want not only to meet diplomatic protests, but also to have a physical presence as mentioned in the video description, go ahead and subscribe. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. All the best. That's all. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.